The year was 2147, a time when humanity had reached farther into space than ever before. Earth's resources were dwindling, and nations had come together to fund Aurora's Hope, the first deep space exploration vessel designed to seek out new worlds that could sustain human life. For months, the crew of 25 scientists, engineers, and explorers traveled through the vast emptiness of space, scanning star systems for signs of habitable planets. Dr. Elias Carter sat at his workstation in the ship's observation deck, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. A linguist by trade, he wasn't there to navigate or repair engines. His role was far more abstract, but equally vital. If they encountered intelligent alien life, it would be up to him to decipher their language and establish communication. It was a daunting task, one that often left him wondering if he was truly prepared. Still, he found solace in the quiet hum of the ship and the rhythmic blinking of control panels around him. On this particular day, however, the calm was shattered. "A gravitational anomaly ahead," shouted Commander Rachel Hayes from the bridge. Her voice crackled over the intercom, sharp with urgency. "All hands, brace for impact." Elias gripped the edge of his desk as the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared, red warning lights flashing across every surface. Outside the viewport, an eerie purple haze enveloped the vessel, pulling it off course like an invisible hand dragging them toward doom. Despite the chaos, Elias couldn't help but marvel at the phenomenon. It was unlike anything documented in human history. The turbulence worsened. Crew members scrambled to secure equipment while others tried desperately to regain control of the ship. But the forces acting on them were too powerful. With a deafening groan, Aurora's Hope careened out of the anomaly and plummeted toward an uncharted planet below. When Elias came to, his head throbbed, and his vision swam. He blinked several times, trying to orient himself. The observation deck was in disarray. Panels sparked, wires hung loose, and debris littered the floor. Coughing against the acrid smell of burnt electronics, he staggered to his feet and made his way to the corridor. Other survivors emerged from various parts of the ship, some limping, others clutching injuries. Commander Hayes organized a quick assessment of casualties and damage. Miraculously, no one had been killed, though several crew members required medical attention. The ship itself wasn't so lucky. Half of its systems were offline, and the hull had sustained significant damage during the crash landing. "We need to figure out where we are," said Lieutenant Marcus Chen, the ship's chief engineer, as he joined the group huddled near the main console. His face was smudged with grease, but his tone remained steady. "If we can get comms back online, maybe we can send a distress signal." Elias nodded absently, his mind already racing ahead. They weren't just stranded. They were on an alien world. And judging by the strange readings they'd picked up before the crash, this planet might harbor intelligent life. As much as survival was their immediate concern, the thought of encountering another species filled him with both excitement and trepidation. After stabilizing the injured and salvaging what supplies they could carry, the crew ventured outside to survey their surroundings. The air was breathable, though slightly thinner than Earth's atmosphere. Towering trees with iridescent leaves stretched toward a pale lavender sky, and the ground beneath their boots shimmered faintly, as if dusted with glittering crystals. Strange insect-like creatures flitted between the foliage, their wings casting prismatic reflections in the sunlight. "Look at this," called Dr. Priya Patel, the team's geologist, pointing to a nearby rock formation. Carved into the smooth stone were intricate symbols resembling flowing script. They pulsed faintly, almost imperceptibly, as if alive. "Their markings," muttered Commander Hayes, running her fingers over the grooves. "Some kind of writing." Elias stepped forward, his heart pounding. This was it, the moment he'd trained for his entire career. These symbols were proof of intelligent life. "It's possible," he said cautiously, "but without context, it's impossible to know what they mean." As the group debated whether to explore further, Elias wandered away from the group. drawn by a peculiar humming sound emanating from deeper within the forest. Pushing aside thick vines, he stumbled upon something extraordinary, a crystalline dome nestled among the trees. Its surface refracted light in dazzling patterns, making it appear as though it were made of liquid glass. Before he could process what he was seeing, a soft voice startled him. "You shouldn't be here." He spun around to find himself face to face with an alien. She stood taller than any human, her silvery skin glinting under the dappled light. Bioluminescent markings adorned her arms and torso, shifting colors in mesmerizing waves. Her large, almond-shaped eyes studied him intently, radiating intelligence and curiosity. I'm sorry," Elias stammered, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "We didn't mean to intrude. Our ship, it crashed." The alien tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Then, to his astonishment, she spoke, not in words, but in a series of melodic tones accompanied by flashes of color across her body. Somehow, Elias understood her meaning. "You are safe." "My name is Elias," he said slowly, unsure if she could comprehend spoken language. "I'm a scientist. We're explorers." She responded with another burst of light and sound, which translated in his mind as Amara. She placed a hand over her chest, then gestured toward him. Introductions complete, she motioned for him to follow her inside the dome. Inside, the structure was even more breathtaking. Walls of translucent crystal emitted a gentle glow, the illuminating chambers filled with floating orbs and pulsating plants. Amara led him to a circular platform at the center of the room, where she activated a device resembling a helmet. Placing it gently on his head, she explained, in fragmented images and sensations, that it would allow them to communicate more effectively. At first, the neural interface overwhelmed Elias. Flashes of emotion, memory, and abstract concepts flooded his mind, leaving him dizzy and disoriented. But gradually, the chaos settled into clarity. He realized that Amara wanted to teach him about her people, the Valith, and their way of life. In return, she hoped he would help bridge the gap between their species. As they began their lessons, Elias knew this was only the beginning of an incredible journey, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew about language, culture, and connection. The neural interface hummed softly on Elias's head, its faint vibrations sending a constant stream of information directly into his mind. At first, the sensations overwhelmed him, flashes of color, bursts of sound, and fleeting emotions that felt foreign yet strangely familiar. He closed his eyes, trying to steady himself as Amara stood nearby, her bioluminescent markings pulsing in soothing shades of blue and green. "You're doing well," she communicated, not with words but through a combination of visual signals and melodic tones. The message translated in his mind as reassurance, though it came wrapped in layers of meaning he couldn't fully grasp. Her calm demeanor helped ease his anxiety, and after several deep breaths, Elias opened his eyes again. "This is incredible," he said aloud, his voice trembling slightly, but also overwhelming. Amara nodded, her glowing patterns shifting to convey understanding. She gestured for him to sit cross-legged on the crystalline floor, then mirrored his posture across from him. With deliberate movements, she extended one hand toward him, palm facing upward. A soft golden light emanated from her fingertips, forming intricate shapes that danced in the air between them. "These are symbols," she explained, or rather, the neural interface interpreted her thoughts as such. "They represent concepts, ideas, emotions." Elias watched intently as the symbols morphed and shifted, each one accompanied by a unique blend of colors and sounds. Some resonated with warmth and comfort, while others carried an edge of urgency or caution. It was unlike any form of communication he had ever encountered, relying less on linear structure and more on holistic expression. "Try this," Amara instructed, creating a simple pattern. A swirling circle of turquoise light, accompanied by a low rhythmic hum. The interface translated it as trust. Elias hesitated, unsure how to respond. His human instinct was to speak, to verbalize his thoughts, but Amara's method required something different. Closing his eyes, he focused on the sensation she had shared, the feeling of trust, and attempted to mimic it. When he opened his eyes, a faint glow surrounded his own hand, though the shape was jagged and unstable compared to hers. Amara smiled, an expression conveyed through subtle changes in her facial markings, and adjusted her own projection to match his imperfect attempt. "Close enough," she signaled. "Progress takes time." Over the next few hours, they practiced basic exchanges. Amara introduced Elias to additional symbols. Harmony, represented by intertwining threads of violet light. Curiosity, depicted as flickering sparks of yellow. And danger, marked by sharp flashes of crimson, accompanied by a high-pitched tone. Each symbol carried nuances that went beyond mere definitions, embedding cultural context within their forms. As the session continued, Elias began noticing patterns in how the Vailith expressed themselves. Their language wasn't just about conveying information, it was about creating connections. Every gesture, every pulse of light, seemed designed to foster unity and mutual understanding. It was beautiful, but also frustratingly complex. Several times, Elias mistook one emotion for another, causing Amara to pause and gently correct him. "It's okay," she assured him when he accidentally projected caution instead of respect. "Your species is new to this. We've had centuries to refine our methods." Despite her patience, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that he was failing. Back on Earth, he prided himself on being quick to adapt. But here, among the Vailith, he felt like a child learning to walk. Still, he refused to give up. If he wanted to bridge the gap between humans and aliens, he needed to master their way of communicating, even if it meant stumbling along the way. Outside the dome, tensions simmered among the stranded crew members. Commander Hayes had organized teams to scavenge for resources and repair the damaged ship, but progress was slow. Supplies were dwindling, and morale was low. Rumors spread about the mysterious alien who had taken Elias under her wing, fueling suspicion and fear. "She's manipulating him," muttered Lieutenant Chen during a late-night meeting in the makeshift camp. "What does she want? Why is she teaching him all this stuff?" Commander Hayes sighed, rubbing her temples. "I don't know, Marcus, but we can't afford to jump to conclusions. For now, we need to focus on survival." Others weren't so willing to wait. Dr. Patel, usually mild-mannered, voiced her concerns openly. "We're sitting ducks out here. What if these aliens aren't as friendly as they seem? What if they're using Elias to spy on us?" Her words struck a nerve. Several crew members nodded in agreement, their expressions grim. While no one suggested outright hostility toward the Vailith, the atmosphere grew tense. Some even began whispering about cutting ties with Elias altogether, accusing him of prioritizing his studies over the group's safety. Unaware of the brewing discontent, Elias immersed himself deeper into his lessons with Amara. One afternoon, she led him to a secluded chamber within the dome, where walls of crystal displayed scenes from Vailith history. Through the neural interface, she shared stories of her people's evolution, from primitive tribes struggling to survive to a highly advanced civilization dedicated to balance and harmony. "These lessons are important," she emphasized, her markings glowing brightly. "Not just for you, but for your species. Understanding leads to cooperation. Cooperation ensures peace." Elias nodded, absorbing her words. Yet, as much as he admired the Vailith philosophy, doubts lingered in the back of his mind. Were all Vailith as peaceful as Amara? Could humanity truly coexist with a species so fundamentally different? And what would happen if his crew discovered the extent of his growing bond with her? Days turned into weeks, and Elias's proficiency improved steadily. He could now recognize dozens of symbols and respond with reasonable accuracy. More importantly, he began to understand the underlying principles of Vailith communication. Unlike human languages, which often relied on rigid syntax and grammar, the Vailith system was fluid and adaptive, allowing for endless variations based on context and intent. One evening, As they sat together in the central chamber, Amara challenged him with a more complex task. "Create something," she urged, her hands gesturing expansively. "Express yourself." Elias hesitated, unsure where to begin. How could he encapsulate his identity, his hopes, fears, and dreams, into a single burst of light and sound? Taking a deep breath, he closed his eyes and let his emotions guide him. Slowly, a pale orange glow emerged from his fingertips, swirling into a spiral shape. It pulsed rhythmically, accompanied by a soft, melodic hum. When he opened his eyes, Amara studied his creation intently. Her markings shifted to reflect admiration and curiosity. "This is unique," she signaled. "It represents resilience, adaptability, and perhaps longing." Elias smiled, surprised by her insight. "Yes," he replied. "That's exactly what I was trying to say." For the first time since arriving on the alien planet, he felt a sense of accomplishment. Though he still had much to learn, he realized that communication wasn't just about mastering symbols. It was about sharing experiences and building bridges. With each passing day, those bridges grew stronger, connecting two vastly different worlds in ways neither species had imagined possible. Yet, even as Elias celebrated his progress, he couldn't ignore the growing divide within his own crew. The question remained, could he convince them to see the Vailith as allies rather than threats? Or would their mistrust drive a wedge between humans and aliens before true understanding could take root? As Elias grew more comfortable with the basics of Vailith communication, Amara decided it was time to introduce him to her people's traditions. "Understanding our symbols is just the beginning," she explained through the neural interface. Her bioluminescent markings shimmered in shades of turquoise and gold as she spoke. "To truly connect, you must experience how we live." Elias nodded eagerly, though a flicker of nervousness lingered in his chest. He had spent weeks learning their language, but stepping into their culture felt like venturing into uncharted territory. Still, he trusted Amara's guidance and followed her out of the crystalline dome toward a nearby village. The settlement was unlike anything Elias had ever seen. Instead of buildings made of stone or metal, the structures here were grown, not built, from living crystal-like material that pulsed faintly with light. Pathways between them glowed softly underfoot, illuminating intricate patterns etched into the ground. The air hummed with a gentle melody, created by the synchronized vibrations of countless Vailith moving about their daily lives. Amara led him to a central plaza where dozens of her people gathered around a large circular platform. Their glowing markings danced in unison, creating a mesmerizing display of colors and rhythms. It was clear this was no ordinary gathering. It was a ceremony, one meant to celebrate unity and harmony. "This is the synthesis ritual," Amara explained. "We perform it regularly to strengthen our connection with each other and with the planet." Elias watched in awe as the participants began to move together, their bodies swaying in perfect synchronization. Bioluminescent pulses rippled across the crowd like waves, blending individual expressions into a collective symphony. The effect was breathtaking, a living tapestry of light and sound that seemed almost supernatural. Amara gestured for Elias to join them. Hesitant but eager to participate, he stepped onto the platform and attempted to mimic their movements. At first, his efforts were clumsy. His human form lacked the fluid grace of the Vailith, and his attempts at matching their glowing patterns resulted in disjointed bursts of color. But instead of laughing or ridiculing him, the Vailith adjusted their rhythm to accommodate his presence, guiding him gently until he found his place within the group. For the first time since arriving on the alien world, Elias felt a profound sense of belonging. Though he didn't fully understand the ritual's purpose, he could feel its power, the way it wove everyone together into a single, cohesive entity. When the ceremony ended, the participants turned to him with glowing smiles, their markings conveying gratitude and acceptance. Over the next few days, Amara invited Elias to observe other aspects of Vailith life. He attended a communal meal where food was shared not just among individuals, but across entire families, ensuring no one went hungry. He witnessed artisans crafting tools and artifacts from the same crystalline material used in their homes, shaping them with precision and care. And he marveled at how every action, no matter how small, seemed to serve a greater purpose, whether it was maintaining balance within the community or preserving the natural beauty of their environment. One evening, Amara took him to a secluded grove filled with towering trees whose leaves emitted a soft, silvery glow. Beneath their branches stood an ancient monument, a massive crystal spire engraved with symbols far older than those he'd learned so far. "This is the Heartstone," Amara said, her voice reverberating through the neural interface. "It holds the memories of our ancestors and serves as a reminder of who we are." She placed her hand on the surface, causing the spire to illuminate from within. Images and sounds flooded Elias's mind, scenes of Vailith history, from their earliest struggles to their current prosperity. He saw how they had once faced extinction due to overconsumption and conflict, only to rebuild their society around principles of sustainability and cooperation. The experience left him both humbled and inspired. "You value harmony above all else," Elias remarked later as they sat beneath the glowing trees. "It's beautiful, but it's also very different from humanity." Amara tilted her head, her markings shifting thoughtfully. "Different does not mean wrong," she replied. "Your species values individuality, creativity, and resilience. These traits have allowed you to thrive despite challenges. But perhaps there is wisdom in finding balance between your strengths and ours." Her words stayed with Elias long after they returned to the dome. They sparked a deeper reflection on human nature and the ways in which his own culture might benefit from adopting some of the Vailith philosophies. Yet he couldn't help but wonder if such ideals were even possible for humanity, or if they would always be too divided by greed, fear, and ambition. Back at the crew's camp, tensions continued to simmer. Commander Hayes tried to maintain order, but whispers of discontent spread like wildfire. Some crew members accused Elias of abandoning his responsibilities, claiming he spent more time with the Vailith than helping repair the ship. Others voiced concerns about the aliens' true intentions, pointing to the advanced technology surrounding them as evidence of potential danger. "It's not normal," Dr. Pidle exclaimed during another heated discussion. "Why would they let us stay here? Why teach him their secrets? There has to be a catch." Lieutenant Chen crossed his arms, his expression grim. "Maybe they're planning something. Maybe they're waiting for us to lower our guard." Commander Hayes sighed, her patience wearing thin. "Speculation won't get us anywhere. We need facts, not paranoia. Until we have proof that the Vailith pose a threat, we focus on fixing the ship and getting home." Despite her authoritative tone, the divide among the crew only deepened. A faction led by Dr. Petel began covertly stockpiling weapons salvaged from the wreckage, preparing for what they believed was inevitable conflict. Meanwhile, others argued for diplomacy, urging the group to trust Elias's judgment. Unaware of these developments, Elias threw himself further into his lessons with Amara. One day, she introduced him to a new concept: resonance. Unlike the symbols he learned earlier, resonance involved aligning one's emotional state with that of others, creating a shared experience that transcended individual boundaries. "To resonate is to become part of something greater," Amara explained. She demonstrated by projecting a wave of calming blue light, inviting Elias to match it. At first he struggled to synchronize his emotions with hers, his human instincts resisting the loss of self. But gradually he let go, allowing his thoughts and feelings to merge with hers. When the exercise ended, Elias felt profoundly changed. For a brief moment, he hadn't just understood Amara, he had been her, experiencing the world through her eyes. It was both exhilarating and terrifying, leaving him with a newfound appreciation for the depth of Vailith connection. Yet, as powerful as the experience was, it also highlighted the vast gulf between their species. Humans prized independence and autonomy, often viewing vulnerability as weakness. Could they ever embrace a philosophy rooted in collective unity? And even if they could, would it be enough to overcome the mistrust festering back at the camp? By the end of the week, Elias realized he couldn't ignore the growing rift among his crew any longer. While he cherished his time with Amara and the Vailith, he knew his ultimate responsibility lay with his fellow humans. If he wanted to prevent disaster, he needed to find a way to bridge the gap, not just between species, but within his own team. As he prepared to return to the camp, Amara placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Trust yourself," she signaled, her markings glowing warmly. "You've come far. Remember, understanding begins with listening." With those words echoing in his mind, Elias set off toward the makeshift settlement, determined to confront the challenges ahead. Little did he know, the hardest test of all was yet to come. Elias returned to the crew's camp with a sense of purpose, but the atmosphere was thick with tension. The makeshift settlement looked more chaotic than ever. Tents were patched haphazardly, equipment lay scattered, and the air buzzed with muttered arguments. Some crew members glared at him as he approached, their expressions a mix of suspicion and frustration. "What have you been doing all this time?" Dr. Priya Patel demanded, stepping forward. Her usually calm demeanor had given way to sharp edges. "We're stuck here because of your little lessons. Meanwhile, half the crew is starving, and the ship's repairs are barely moving." Elias raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "I understand your concerns," he said, keeping his voice steady. "But what I'm learning from the Vailith could help us, not just survive, but thrive. They've offered tools and resources we don't even know how to replicate yet." "You mean she has?" Lieutenant Marcus Chen interjected, pointing accusingly toward the distant crystalline dome. "That alien princess of yours. How do we know she's not manipulating you? For all we know, they're planning to turn us into lab rats or slaves." Commander Hayes stepped between them, her face stern. "Enough," she barked, silencing the growing murmurs. Turning to Elias, she softened her tone slightly. "Look, Carter, I get it. You're fascinated by these aliens. But we need you here. Your job isn't just to study them. It's to make sure we all get home alive." Elias nodded, guilt gnawing at him. He hadn't meant to neglect his duties, but the allure of understanding an entirely new culture had consumed him. Now, faced with the reality of his crew's struggles, he realized he needed to strike a balance. "You're right," he admitted. "I'll focus on helping repair the ship. But trust me, the Vailith aren't our enemies. If anything, they might be our best chance at getting off this planet." The next morning, Elias joined Lieutenant Chen and a small team working on the damaged hull of Aurora's Hope. Despite their earlier hostility, Chen seemed willing to put aside differences for the sake of progress. Together, they examined the ship's power core, which had sustained critical damage during the crash. "Any ideas?" Chen asked gruffly, wiping sweat from his brow. Elias hesitated, then remembered something Amara had mentioned about energy manipulation. "Their technology uses resonance frequencies to amplify power output," he explained. "If we can replicate that principle, maybe we can stabilize the core." Chen raised an eyebrow skeptically. "And how exactly are we supposed to do that without their fancy glowing crystals?" "We ask for help," Elias replied firmly. Before anyone could protest, he turned and headed back toward the dome, determined to broker a compromise. When he arrived, Amara greeted him warmly, though her markings flickered with concern when he explained the situation. "Your people distrust us," she communicated through the neural interface. "Why should we assist them?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Elias insisted. "They're scared and desperate. If you show them kindness, maybe they'll see you're not a threat." Amara considered this for a moment before nodding. "Very well. We will share what we can. But remember, trust must flow both ways." Back at the ship, the arrival of several Vailith engineers caused immediate panic among the crew. Weapons were drawn, and shouts filled the air until Commander Hayes intervened. "Stand down," she ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. Let them prove themselves first. With Elias acting as translator, the Vailith demonstrated how to use harmonic frequencies to stabilize the power core. Their methods were unlike anything the humans had seen. Instead of mechanical adjustments, they relied on precise vibrations emitted from handheld devices. Within hours, the core began humming steadily, its readings returning to safe levels. As the repairs progressed, some crew members started warming up to their alien counterparts. Others remained wary, watching every move with narrowed eyes. Still, the collaboration marked a turning point, a fragile truce born out of necessity. In the evenings, Elias continued his lessons with Amara, though now they focused less on formal instruction and more on personal connection. They spent hours discussing the differences between their species, often finding humor in their contrasting perspectives. "You humans place so much importance on individual achievements," Amara mused one night, her markings glowing softly. "Yet you seem happiest when surrounded by others. And your people value unity above all else." Elias countered with a smile. "But doesn't that sometimes leave individuals feeling lost? Like their voices don't matter?" Amara tilted her head thoughtfully. "Perhaps, but harmony requires sacrifice from everyone, even leaders like me." Her admission surprised him. "You feel trapped by your role." "Not trapped," she corrected gently. "Responsible. My choices affect my entire species. That weight is heavy, but it reminds me why balance matters." Their conversations deepened over time, touching on everything from art to philosophy. Through the neural interface, Elias experienced fragments of Amara's memories. Her childhood among the crystalline spires, her training as a leader, and her hopes for the future. In return, he shared stories of Earth, its bustling cities, diverse cultures, and endless capacity for innovation. One evening, as they sat beneath the glowing trees near the Heartstone, Elias voiced a question that had lingered in his mind. "Do you think humans and Vailith can truly coexist, or are we too different?" Amara paused, her markings shifting to a contemplative shade of indigo. "Differences are not barriers, they are bridges waiting to be built. It will take effort from both sides, but yes, I believe coexistence is possible." Her words reassured him, though doubts still lingered. Back at the camp, tensions simmered despite the recent breakthroughs. Dr. Patel and her faction remained unconvinced, arguing that relying on the Vailith only made them vulnerable. "What happens when they decide we're no longer useful?" she challenged during another meeting. "Will they toss us aside like yesterday's trash?" Commander Hayes tried to mediate, but the divide ran deep. Frustrated, Elias realized he couldn't rely solely on logic to win them over. He needed to show them, not tell them, that the Vailith were trustworthy. The opportunity came sooner than expected. During a routine supply run, a group of crew members stumbled upon a pack of predatory creatures lurking near the edge of the forest. The beasts, resembling massive insectoids with razor-sharp mandibles, attacked without warning. Chaos erupted as the humans scrambled to defend themselves, their weapons proving ineffective against the creatures' armored exoskeletons. Just as hope seemed lost, a group of Vailith warriors appeared, led by none other than Amara. Using specialized tools that emitted high-frequency pulses, they drove the predators away, saving the stranded crew members. When the dust settled, even the most skeptical among them couldn't deny the aliens' bravery or their willingness to protect humans. That night, around the campfire, the mood shifted noticeably. For the first time since arriving on the planet, laughter replaced arguments, and tentative smiles replaced scowls. Though mistrust wouldn't vanish overnight, the incident planted seeds of mutual respect. As Elias watched his crewmates interact with the Vailith, he felt a surge of pride and relief. The bond he'd forged with Amara had become a bridge, however fragile, connecting two vastly different worlds. And though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, he knew they were closer to understanding each other than ever before. The fragile peace between the human crew and the Vailith held steady, but Elias couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their hosts than met the eye. While the aliens had proven themselves helpful and peaceful so far, Something about their history gnawed at him. Amara's earlier mention of near extinction and rebuilding their society hinted at a darker past, one she hadn't fully explained. One evening, as they worked together in the crystalline dome, repairing ancient machinery buried beneath its floors, Elias noticed faint etchings on the walls. They weren't like the flowing symbols he'd grown accustomed to. These were jagged and angular, almost aggressive in design. Curiosity got the better of him, and he traced his fingers over the markings. "What are these?" he asked Amara through the neural interface, his tone cautious but insistent. Amara froze for a moment, her bioluminescent markings dimming slightly, a sign Elias had come to recognize as discomfort or hesitation. She didn't respond immediately, instead focusing intently on the device in her hands. When she finally spoke, her words carried an unusual weight. "These are remnants of our ancestors," she said. "A time before balance." Elias pressed further, sensing her reluctance. "Before balance? What does that mean?" Her markings shifted to a somber shade of gray-blue as she projected images directly into his mind via the neural interface. He saw flashes of devastation, cities reduced to rubble, skies choked with smoke, and Valeth bodies lying lifeless on barren ground. The emotions accompanying the visions hit him hard: despair, anger, and regret. "Our people once consumed without restraint," Amara explained. "We drained our planet's resources, waged wars over what remained, and nearly destroyed ourselves in the process. It took centuries to heal, to rebuild not just our world but our way of thinking." Elias absorbed the information silently, his heart heavy with the implications. Humanity had faced similar challenges back on Earth, though they hadn't yet reached the brink of extinction. Was this why the Valeth valued harmony so deeply? Had their survival depended entirely on abandoning conflict? But then another thought struck him. "If your species learned from its mistakes, why do I sense you're hiding something else?" he asked gently, choosing his words carefully. "There's more to your history, isn't there?" Amara hesitated again, her glowing patterns flickering uncertainly. Finally, she sighed. A soft, melodic sound, and activated a hidden panel in the wall. Behind it lay a data repository containing fragments of archived memories. With a wave of her hand, she brought one of them to life, projecting it into the air between them. The scene unfolded like a holographic movie. Elias watched as Valeth ships approached another alien civilization, a race of insectoid beings with iridescent wings and multifaceted eyes. At first, the interaction seemed peaceful, with both sides exchanging gifts and knowledge. But soon, tensions arose. Miscommunication led to mistrust, and mistrust escalated into violence. The Valeth, desperate to protect their newly stabilized society, resorted to measures Elias could barely comprehend. "They attacked," Amara admitted, her voice trembling through the interface. "We feared they would exploit our weaknesses, so we eliminated the threat." Elias felt a chill run down his spine. The revelation was staggering. These were not the benevolent beings he'd come to admire. They were capable of atrocities just like any other species. And yet, guilt radiated from Amara, her markings pulsing erratically, as if burdened by shame. "We've changed since then," she continued. "We vowed never to repeat those mistakes. That's why we observe other species carefully, to ensure history doesn't repeat itself." Elias struggled to process what he'd seen. On one hand, he understood the Valeth's fear. Survival often came at a cost. On the other hand, the idea that they might view humanity as a potential threat unsettled him. Could their kindness simply be a tactic to assess whether humans posed a danger? "You must tell the others," Amara urged, breaking through his thoughts. "Not everything, not yet, but enough to prepare them. If my people decide you cannot coexist peacefully, they may act preemptively." Her warning sent a jolt of panic through Elias. "You think they'd harm us?" he asked, his voice tight. "I don't know," she replied honestly, "but I want to prevent that possibility. Trust is fragile, and fear can undo it quickly." Determined to share what he'd learned, Elias returned to the camp late that night. The crew was gathered around a fire, sharing stories and laughter. For a brief moment, he envied their camaraderie, wishing he could join them without the weight of his discovery pressing down on him. Commander Hayes noticed his troubled expression and excused herself from the group. "What's wrong, Carter?" she asked, her tone sharp but concerned. Elias hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Telling the crew about the Valeth's violent past could reignite their fears and sabotage the fragile trust they'd built. But keeping it secret risked putting everyone in danger. "Amara showed me something tonight," he began slowly. "It's complicated. Their history isn't as clean as we thought. There was a time when they made choices, terrible choices, to survive." Hayes frowned, crossing her arms. "Are you saying they're dangerous?" "No," Elias replied firmly. "At least, not now. But they're cautious, and if they feel threatened, they might revert to old habits." Hayes considered this for a moment, her gaze fixed on the distant glow of the crystalline dome. "Then we need to prove we're not a threat. We stick to repairs, avoid provoking them, and focus on getting home as quickly as possible." Though her plan sounded reasonable, Elias knew it wouldn't be enough. The Valeth's fear ran deep, rooted in centuries of trauma. Earning their full trust would require more than passive cooperation. It would demand understanding and empathy. Over the next few days, Elias threw himself into fostering connections between the two groups. He encouraged crew members to participate in Valeth rituals, explaining their significance and helping translate gestures and symbols. Some, like Lieutenant Chen, remained skeptical but begrudgingly joined in. Others, such as Dr. Puddle, refused outright, claiming the effort was wasted. "They'll turn on us eventually," Patel muttered during one heated exchange. "Why waste time playing nice when we should be preparing for the worst?" "Because preparation isn't always about weapons," Elias countered. "Sometimes it's about building relationships. You wanted proof they're trustworthy. This is it." Patil glared at him but said nothing more. Though her skepticism lingered, she stopped actively opposing his efforts. Meanwhile, Elias spent every spare moment with Amara, delving deeper into her people's culture and philosophy. Together, they explored ancient archives, piecing together fragments of Valeth history. Each revelation added complexity to the picture Elias had formed of them, not as perfect beings, but as flawed individuals striving for redemption. One afternoon, as they examined a particularly intricate artifact, Amara turned to him with an earnest expression. "Thank you," she communicated through the interface. Her markings shimmered warmly, conveying gratitude beyond words. "For what?" Elias asked, surprised. "For believing in us," she replied. "For seeing us as we are, not perfect, but trying. That means more than you know." Her words struck a chord within him. In many ways, the Valeth reminded him of humanity. Imperfect, scared by past mistakes, but capable of growth. Perhaps that was the key to bridging their differences, not perfection, but shared imperfection. As the days passed, progress on the ship accelerated thanks to the combined efforts of humans and Valeth. Yet beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Dr. Patel and her faction continued stockpiling weapons, convinced that disaster loomed on the horizon. Even Commander Hayes grew increasingly uneasy, torn between hope and paranoia. Elias knew time was running out. If he wanted to secure a future where humans and Valeth could coexist peacefully, he needed to take a bold step. But what that step should be, and whether it would succeed, remained unclear. Little did he know, fate was about to force his hand. The fragile harmony between the human crew and the Valeth teetered on the edge of collapse. Despite Elias's efforts to foster trust, fear and suspicion continued to simmer beneath the surface. Dr. Priya Patil and her faction had grown bolder in their defiance, openly questioning whether reliance on the aliens was wise or safe. "We're playing right into their hands," Patil argued during a heated meeting in the makeshift camp. Her voice carried an urgency that bordered on desperation. "They've been feeding us lies since day one. What happens when we finish repairing the ship? Do you really think they'll let us leave? Commander Rachel Hayes tried to maintain order, but even she struggled to keep the group united. Patel, we don't have evidence to support your claims, she said firmly. Until then, we focus on what matters, getting home. But Patel wasn't alone in her paranoia. Several crew members nodded in agreement, their expressions grim. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, though initially supportive of working with the Valeth, now seemed torn. He glanced at Elias, his eyes narrowing slightly. She has a point, he admitted reluctantly. We're putting all our eggs in one basket. If something goes wrong, we're sitting ducks. Elias clenched his fists, frustration bubbling inside him. He understood their fears. It was natural to be cautious. But their refusal to see the Valeth as allies only made things worse. You're letting fear dictate your actions. He snapped, his voice rising. Amara and her people have done nothing but help us. Why can't you see that? They've helped because it benefits them, Patel retorted sharply. Maybe not now, but eventually, they'll use us for their own gain. Before the argument could escalate further, a sudden commotion erupted outside the tent. Shouts echoed through the camp as panicked crew members scrambled toward the center. Elias rushed out to investigate, his heart pounding. What's happening? Commander Hayes demanded, pushing through the crowd. It's Patel's group, someone shouted. They've taken control of the weapons cache. Elias froze, dread washing over him. Sure enough, a handful of crew members stood near the storage area, armed with salvaged tools and makeshift firearms. Patel herself stepped forward, her expression resolute. We're taking matters into our own hands, she declared loudly, addressing the assembled group. If no one else will protect us, we will. Hayes stepped forward, her voice steely. Stand down, Doctor. This is mutiny. This isn't about power, Patel shot back. It's about survival. We won't wait around until those aliens decide we're expendable. The standoff grew tense, with both sides glaring at each other. Elias knew this could spiral out of control if someone didn't act quickly. Glancing at the crystalline dome in the distance, he realized the Valeth would notice soon. And if they perceived the humans as hostile, disaster would follow. I'll handle this, Elias said quietly, turning to Hayes. Trust me. Without waiting for a response, he sprinted toward the dome, his mind racing. When he arrived, Amara greeted him with concern etched across her glowing markings. What's wrong? She asked, sensing his distress. There's trouble at the camp, Elias explained hurriedly. Some of my crew are planning to attack, not just the ship, but possibly your people too. I need your help to stop them. Amara hesitated, her bioluminescent patterns shifting uneasily. This is dangerous, she replied. If my people feel threatened, they may retaliate. I know, Elias said firmly. That's why we have to intervene before it's too late. Please, trust me. After a moment's pause, Amara nodded. She signaled to several nearby Valeth warriors. Ho moved swiftly to accompany them back to the camp. As they approached, the sight of alien figures caused panic among the armed crew members. Stay back, Patel shouted, raising her weapon. We mean business. Elias stepped forward, placing himself between the two groups. Put down your weapons, he called out, his voice steady despite the chaos. This isn't the answer. You don't understand, Carter, Patel yelled. They're using us. Once we're gone, they'll forget we ever existed. No, Elias countered fiercely. You're wrong. These people saved us multiple times. They shared their knowledge, their resources, and their trust. And now you're throwing it all away because of fear. Patil faltered, lowering her weapon slightly. Seizing the opportunity, Elias turned to address the entire group. I get it. I do. Trusting strangers is hard, especially when so much is at stake. But violence won't solve anything. It'll only make things worse for everyone. His words resonated with some of the crew members, who began setting their weapons aside. Others remained hesitant, glancing nervously at Patel. Sensing the shift, Commander Hayes stepped forward. "He's right," she said firmly. "We came here to explore, to learn, and to survive. Let's not throw that away because of mistrust and anger. Stand down, all of you." One by one, the rest of the armed crew lowered their weapons, though tension still hung heavy in the air. Amara and the Violet warriors observed silently, their presence calming rather than threatening. In the aftermath of the crisis, Elias worked tirelessly to repair the damage. Under Amara's guidance, the Violet offered medical assistance to injured crew members and helped stabilize the remaining supplies. Their actions spoke louder than any words, slowly chipping away at the lingering mistrust. During a quiet moment later that evening, Elias addressed the group once more. Standing beside Amara, he used the neural interface to translate her message into human terms. "My people have made mistakes in the past," Amara conveyed. "Mistakes born of fear and misunderstanding. But we've learned from them. Today, you showed courage, not by fighting, but by choosing peace. That gives me hope." Her words struck a chord, earning murmurs of approval from the crew. Even Paddle seemed moved, though she avoided meeting Elias's gaze. As repairs on Aurora's Hope neared completion, the bond between humans and Valeth strengthened. Crew members who had once viewed the aliens with suspicion now exchanged smiles and gestures of gratitude. Though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, a foundation of mutual respect had been laid. For Elias, the experience was transformative. He had come to this alien world seeking understanding, but he'd gained far more: a deeper appreciation for connection, empathy, and the universal desire to overcome differences. Yet, as the ship prepared for departure, he couldn't ignore the bittersweet feeling tugging at his heart. Leaving meant saying goodbye to Amara and the life he'd begun building among the Valeth. Still, he reminded himself of her earlier words: trust must flow both ways. With that thought, he turned to face the crystalline dome one last time, knowing the lessons he'd learned would stay with him forever. The day of departure arrived, casting a bittersweet shadow over both humans and Valeth. Aurora's Hope stood repaired and ready, its sleek hull gleaming under the pale lavender sky. The crew worked tirelessly to load the last of their supplies, their movements tinged with a mix of relief and regret. For weeks, they had called this alien world home, a place of danger, discovery, and unexpected connection. Elias lingered near the crystalline dome, his heart heavy as he prepared to say goodbye to Amara and her people. Over the past months, they had formed a bond that transcended species and language, one rooted in mutual respect and shared understanding. Yet now, it was time to return to Earth, carrying not just memories but lessons that could reshape humanity's future. Amara approached him, her bioluminescent markings glowing softly in shades of blue and gold, a combination Elias had come to recognize as warmth and farewell. "You've done more than you realize," she communicated through the neural interface. Her voice resonated in his mind, filled with gratitude and admiration. "Your courage has bridged worlds." "I couldn't have done it without you," Elias replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You taught me so much, not just about your people, but about myself." She smiled, an expression conveyed through subtle shifts in her glowing patterns, and extended a hand. In her palm lay a small crystal orb, no larger than a marble. It pulsed faintly with light, containing within it fragments of Valeth knowledge and memory. "This is for your people," she explained. "A gift. May it remind them that understanding begins with listening, and that trust can overcome even the greatest divides." Elias accepted the orb reverently, cradling it in his hands as if it were the most precious thing he had ever held. "Thank you," he said simply, though the depth of his gratitude couldn't be captured in words. As the crew gathered around the ship for a final send-off, Commander Hayes addressed the group. "We came here seeking answers," she began, her tone steady yet reflective. "What we found was far greater than any of us expected. We found allies, teachers, and friends. Let's not forget what we've learned, or the sacrifices made to get us here." Her speech earned nods of agreement from the crew, many of whom exchanged somber glances. Even Dr. Patel, who had once been the loudest critic of the Valith, looked thoughtful, her arms crossed tightly as if holding herself together. When the time came to board the ship, Elias hesitated, turning back one last time to face Amara. She stood tall and regal, surrounded by her people, her glowing markings shimmering like stars against the twilight. With a final bow, she signaled her farewell, a gesture of unity and hope. Safe travels, Elias Carter, her thoughts echoed in his mind, carried by the fading hum of the neural interface. May your journey bring light to others. Tears welled in his eyes as he climbed aboard the ship, clutching the crystal orb close to his chest. As the hatch sealed shut and the engines roared to life, he took one last look at the planet below, watching as the crystalline spires disappeared into the distance. The journey back to Earth was long but uneventful. During the voyage, Elias spent countless hours studying the crystal orb, deciphering the fragments of knowledge stored within it. Each memory offered insight into Valith culture, their struggles, triumphs, and philosophies. He marveled at how deeply interconnected their lives were, not just with each other, but with their environment. Their emphasis on balance and harmony struck him as profoundly relevant to humanity's own challenges. When Aurora's Hope finally entered Earth's orbit, the crew was greeted by a global audience eager to hear their story. News of their encounter with an advanced alien civilization spread rapidly, sparking debates and discussions across every continent. Governments convened emergency meetings, scientists pored over Elias's findings, and ordinary citizens wondered what this meant for humanity's place in the universe. At a press conference held in the United Nations Assembly Hall, Elias delivered a heartfelt address. Standing before a sea of cameras and microphones, he held up the crystal orb, letting its soft glow illuminate the room. "This is a gift from the Valith," he began, his voice calm but powerful. "It contains